Pastor Shapiro, hey, known on the internet as Harry Hawk, and we are about to get started. This is another live lecture. Nobody is joining us right now, but if you're watching later, I think that's most of you. Obviously, this is turning out not to be such a great time, but remember that you should watch this and look at the slides, look at the reading, and really if you have questions that you weren't able to ask because you're not able to attend, obviously text me questions, ask each other questions on the Q&A form, and so forth. I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to get started. All right, so this is our week 4 lecture, and there's only one part to this week. All the other weeks have 2 parts, but this is essentially the middle of the course, and it's just 1 week. There's a little bit more reading this week than some of the other weeks, so I'm not going to fit it all in here, so take a look on Canvas. I'll certainly show it to you and go through it with you. But today we're talking about pricing, Servicescapes, and our discussion boards, and 2 of them, including our discussion board on pricing. That's really important. As we'll see, pricing is really at the heart of any business. I think everybody agrees there's many things in life that you would purchase: a new home, a new car, new rugs, new roofs for your house, new wardrobe, but it's the price that prevents most of us from simply getting everything that we want. And when we do decide to buy something, many of us make very different decisions. Some people buy very expensive products in the hope that they're of high quality and will last long. Other people buy more affordable products with the hope that while they may not last as long, they'll get the most value. And obviously, there are some products that are low cost and high value and so forth, but we'll get into all of that. We have a few important learning outcomes, and these are, you should be able to understand how pricing impacts demand. And that's just what I was talking about, the fact that when you are charging more or less, that will impact how many people are willing to come to your event or buy your product. And it's not always low price, high demand, right? In the case of perfumes and other sorts of luxury products, part of the appeal is the high price, and the high price signals high quality. But we'll talk a lot more about that in a few minutes. You should also understand that there are risks in pricing too high or too low. If you overprice, people may not come, or if they do come, you may not really be prepared to deliver at the quality. Imagine the cheapest car you can buy is probably about $10,000 new, very low-end car. But if we were charging $100,000 for that car and people bought it, they would probably be disappointed. And if you saw Mercedes E-Class AMG on sale for $10,000, like a new one, you'd be really nervous that there was something seriously wrong with it. You might be tempted because it's probably $150,000, $200,000 car, but still you'd be very nervous. Why is it only $10,000? So pricing sends a lot of signals to us, and there's a lot of risks in pricing being either too high or too low. A next learning outcome is just understand the basics of servicescaping, specifically that stimulation of staff and customers within a business impacts the perception of the business. So the look, the feel of your business sends a signal. Is it a fast food joint? Is it high-end dining? And it holds true for your events. How is the event laid out and decored? How are the signs made? Are there signs? Those sorts of things. The quality of the service impacts the service delivery as well. Rather, I should say the perception of the Servicescape will impact the quality of the service, and it impacts the delivery, because all of that stimulation impacts ultimately how staff and guests are able to interact and work with each other. If the space is designed well, often staff and guests can really interact in a very appropriate, predictable, and excellent manner. But if it's not designed well, then you might find customers and staff are frustrated when they have to interact with each other. You can imagine a bank where there's thick glass between the customers and you can't pass money or take money from the teller without going to another window. That could get very frustrating. Likewise, if you don't understand the language of from one party to the other, if the signs aren't helpful, if anything is misleading, if the staff always have to explain that the free hot dog is only available on Tuesday at 2 a.m., and then all week they're answering questions, well, I'm sorry, you can't get that right now. The low-cost hot dog is only available Tuesday at 2 a.m. They're going to be frustrated because they have to totally all the time, completely day in and day out, have to answer that question. And the customers are going to be exasperated, right? Stressed, because they say, oh, low-cost hot dog. And then when they ask about it, they're told they can't get it. Finally, you should understand that the Servicescape for an event will have a great deal of impact on how the staff and guests interact, just as I was explaining how you set it up. If you have a closed check, such as a jacket check or coat check, umbrella check, you may be having an event in the rainy season, and so all of a sudden there's a long line of people trying to check their umbrella or their jacket, and if you didn't staff that well, everything's getting off to a bad start, or people waiting in line to get badges or credentials, speakers who can't find the speaker waiting room, and so forth. All right, so we're going to talk about pricing, and pricing has to do with economics, the economics of everyday life. And this is, looks a little bit complicated, but this particular center point of the graph, this equilibrium, is simply saying that's the Goldilocks spot. It's just right, where the price reflects the quality and you've maximized your ability to sell your supply against demand. Imagine that you have a product and you can only make 2 of them a day. A very fancy cheesecake. I knew a lady who had the #2 rated cheesecake in New York City by the New York Times. She could only make 2 of them a day. And so she had to price them high enough that she could make a living from that. But at the same time, if she priced it too high, she wouldn't sell any. So it's a very tricky thing. You need to sell 2 cheesecakes a day. You can't sell them for $10 because most of us can't live on 2 times 10 or $20 a day. If she sold them each for $150, so that would be $300 a day. There's 7 days in a week. That's $2,100 a week, roughly $8,000–9,000 a month. You're starting to get into a category where she could pay her rent for her restaurant and so forth and survive. She could have other income streams, but that balancing of supply and demand. What if you have a huge supply? You have thousands and thousands of something. If you need to pay for them, if you need to pay to store them, so maybe you purchase them at an affordable price, but every day that they sit in a warehouse, you're paying somebody to store them. So there becomes a point in time where you're losing money just because you haven't sold them. So you may need to lower the price to increase demand. And that's what this is showing. As the price goes down, often, right, the quality is lower, right? Higher price usually means higher quality, but then that impacts supply and demand. So as you have a lot of extra supply, you may want to lower the price to increase demand. And so there's some magical point in the middle where you have 100 items and at the price that you've set, you have 100 customers. And the price also reflects the quality of the product that you're offering. There's many fancy hypercars today, very high-end $2–3 million cars. They may only make 30 or 40 or 100 of them. And so they're trying to match supply and demand. But likewise, if you have a local coffee shop, whether it's a Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts, you know, they have rent to pay every month. They need to adjust the price of the coffee to sell a lot of it, but high enough that they can still pay the benefits, especially a place like Starbucks where they have tuition and health benefits for their staff. So, you know, it becomes really critical that they do a good job. So we spent a fair amount of time on this graph, and we're not going to fully understand this the way an economist would. But again, as we raise the price, we should expect that the quality is going up. That's what the market expects. There's very few very expensive products that are poor. We would consider that fraudulent, right? And as the price goes down, we generally equate that with lower quality. So, you know, Chanel, which company that sells perfume, for example, you know, Chanel No. 5 being a very expensive, high value and well-known perfume, they don't sell it for $1 a bottle because that's not luxurious. That doesn't make it appealing. When it's something is very expensive like that, it makes it appealing. Even if the quality and other factors, you know, justify perhaps a lower price, the higher price truly helps it sell, also for certain liquors. And so we need to think about our event in terms of supply and demand. How many spaces do we have available? How much room, how many tickets can we sell before we hit our fire code legal limit? And so we want to work to get that Goldilocks spot. We want to set a price where we sell every ticket at the best possible price. We want to set a price that's of the quality of the event. If you had a food event, you're charging $150, and when people got there, there was really almost no food and very little to drink, and maybe the drinks were extra. You had a cash bar, so you're paying $150 for this all-you-can-eat event, and you get there and there's very little food, and you have to pay for the drinks because, you know, it's all you can eat. We didn't say all you can drink. A lot of people would probably feel ripped off unless there was something very, very special about the little bit of food that you had. Conversely, if you have a truly all-you-can-eat event and you price that too low, obviously you're going to lose money, and you're really not going to be able to offer, you know, high-quality food that a food event needs. So when we're thinking about your event, we need to think about supply and demand, how many tickets versus how many people want to buy the ticket, and how to price it to find that Goldilocks equilibrium price. So that's one factor, truly what the market would allow you to price your event at. In part, this is based on what competitors are charging. If there's other folks doing dating events, let's say you're doing like a speed dating event. If there's other speed dating events, maybe one at a nearby church or a civic center or a favorite restaurant or hangout, and you're charging twice as much or half the price as the other, why is yours only half the price? Or why is yours twice as much? How do we justify it in the marketing and the communications and the value that we're delivering? But after all these factors are considered, there's one other super critical factor, which is ultimately how much does it actually cost you to make the event? Because you can't sell the event for less than it costs, or you could, but you would lose money. So again, to summarize, it's important to understand that pricing too low let's correct this here. If we price too low, people may not believe you have a quality event. If you price too low, you are assured to lose money on the event. You'll definitely lose money. That's what I'm saying. Price too high, and you may keep people away. And you price too high, also, again, people might think it's an incredibly high quality event. And so you better be able to actually deliver. You know, if you're charging $500-600 for your event, it has to be worth it. And there's some events that are $3,000 or $4,000 or even more. So it really has to be worth that. So again, like Goldilocks and the Three Bears, when it comes to pricing, everybody's trying to get it right. That's this sweet spot where we have a balance between supply and demand and price versus quality. But that's one factor, including the competitive landscape, as I mentioned. But the other major factor that we need to consider is the actual economics of your event. How much is the room? How much is security, electricity, food, staffing, tickets, signs, AV rentals, carpet rentals, bands, music fees, music charges, how much you may be paying union staff to load or unload trucks and set things up, and of course then all the marketing costs for the internet ads and the TV ads and the billboards. Got to put all of those costs together, and let's say that came to $100,000, and you could have only 100 people at your event. You would have to charge $1,000 a person to break even. If you could have 1,000 people there, you'd only have to charge $100 a person to break even. So if we could have 1,500 people and charge $100, we can make $50,000. But, again, if you don't have a good, accurate cost basis, a budget that includes a reasonable marketing budget and all insurance and trash hauling and, all the costs, maybe hotel rooms for guests, gifts for speakers, all those sorts of things, then, you're not going to be able to adequately price the event. And you may work out an event and realize the venue is too big or the venue is too small, or any of the other cost basis that I mentioned, like insurance or staffing, signs, AV rentals. How often are you going to do the event? Is it a one-time event? You're going to do it every month, every year, every other year? And then we can get into sponsorships and all other kinds of ways of additional revenue streams. But still, at the end of the day, you need to know what your event will cost, or you can't properly price it. Hello, I hear that there's somebody here. Who's there?
Oh, hello. It's Catherine Rubio.
Oh, hello, welcome. So I'm
Hi.
you can't see what I'm doing, right?
No, I'm trying to get to my computer.
I'm glad that you're here. Great to have you here. Did you catch any of that? Is there anything I can repeat or go through?
No, I'll just rewatch it later. Go ahead.
Awesome. Okay. Well, we're talking about pricing. I hear a young student there.
Yeah.
So in talking about pricing, I now want to go into Canvas and talk about the discussion board that we have for the second part of this week on pricing. We have 2 discussion boards this week. And so here I am at the home page, and we can go into discussions, and there is a discussion board called pricing. And you'll see language very similar to what's on the slides, where we're talking about the importance of pricing too high or too low. Kat, I'm gonna mute you, and you are muted now. But if you need to unmute to ask a question, please do, and I'll check back in with you as well. But so here are the instructions. This, to me, is one of the most critical assignments. It's really good that we start to understand the cost of our event so that we can price it. If we can't price our event, it's not really a real event, and we can't market it unless we know the price. Because I can tell you it's the best, highest quality, most amazing event, but is it really? And, how much is that ticket? Can I afford that ticket? So again, as always, we have our different tracks. And so if you're a track 1 or 3, you're going to follow these first sets of instructions. And the first thing is to create a budget for your event. Now, this may be a lot of work if you haven't started on your final project. You should be working on your final project from a couple of weeks ago. If you haven't, this is really kind of a big warning to, get started. And one of the big parts of the marketing business plan is to have some kind of a budget, particularly how much is the venue going to be and some of the other costs. So I'm asking you to create a Google spreadsheet and link to it. And then in the post, make a note of the legal capacity of the space. And I'm not looking for an imaginary space, that costs $2 and you get to have 2,000 people there. You really need to go out and find the actual space that you're going to use. If you're part of a church or some other organization and you're going to use their facilities for some kind of donation, or it's included in a membership or as part of your, belonging to that group, that's fine, but you still need to know what the legal capacity is. And you also need to know what kind of insurance or other requirements that they may have. You certainly would want to have insurance no matter someone said you did or you didn't. And then based on that budget and the legal capacity, I want you to work out, if you sold all the tickets, what's the break-even price? The price where you lose no money and make no money. That right in the middle spot where if you're going to have 300 people and you're going to sell all 300 tickets, what's the price that you have to charge to lose no money and make no money? And then you're going to do the same calculation again, but based on half capacity. So again, if the capacity was 300, you'll do the same calculation again for 150. Again, how much you have to charge to break even. Make no money and lose no money. You might think, well, it's just double because it's half the people, but there are variable costs, and that's important to understand in your budget. There are some costs that are fixed. You have to pay for the venue, perhaps, no matter if one person comes or all 300 people come. But there are other costs that may be variable, like food, entertainment, music. Some of these may be priced ultimately based on how many people are there. So just because it's half the people doesn't mean the costs are going to be exactly double. So you need to think about that. And then the final one is you price out where you've sold 3/4 of the capacity. So, but the goal is to make a 15% profit. So if you had 100-person venue, 3/4 would be 75 people. So if you sold 75 people tickets and you need to make a 15% profit, how much would you have to charge? And again, all of that is based on your budget. So, this may seem a little complicated if you haven't thought about your budget, but I believe most of you have started to think about it. It's something that I've been asking about. It's in the template for your business marketing plan. And obviously you need to include your marketing costs. And at this point, a lot of these costs are going to be estimates. It's okay to estimate some of these, but if you're going to do this for real, of course, you have to ultimately get hard numbers. All right. And then I want you to find on the internet 2 similar events, even if they're not in San Diego area, wherever they are, is the 2 events that you can find that are most similar to yours. If no one's doing anything like yours, then find an event that might appeal to the same group of people, or the sage, we talked about segments, right? In the last lecture, find an event that would appeal to a very identical segment, if necessary. And so you're going to link to 2 events, link to their pricing pages, but in your post, indicate the prices and compare that to the prices that we discussed here. So we get a sense of, is your event competitively priced? If you are track 2, which means you are looking for employment, There's really two sets here. Either if you're looking for a full-time job, I want you to detail the kind of job you're looking for, like a job description, and then use online search tools to find 3 examples of jobs that would fit what you're looking for. I'm looking for you to find jobs that mention salaries. Some jobs will say, we pay, salary based on your qualifications or something. I don't want you to find those jobs. I want you to find ones that list the salary. They may say, we pay 50,000 or 75,000. You may find that they list like a range. We pay 50 to 70,000, something like that. But I want you to find 3 jobs that are close to your ideal job, where those 3 jobs, where the job post online includes the salary offered. Then I want you to summarize each of the 3 jobs, including the salary. So just talk about the differences. Maybe one's for a large company, maybe they're all for large companies or small companies, maybe they're startups. So kind of explain the differences, strengths and weaknesses, that sort of thing, and indicate why you would be qualified for these jobs. And if there's something that you have that's missing, you can talk about that as well. On the other hand, if you're not looking for full-time employment, you're looking for gig work, freelance work, or you have your own business where you're selling a service, then I want you to use the online site to find 3 examples of gigs or offerings of service as close as possible to yours. Again, ideally in San Diego, but if necessary, outside the area. Again, summarize each of those 3 offerings or gigs. And again, just like the other example, I want you to explain how yours would be different. Obviously, I'm asking you to, excuse me. I'm asking you to detail why you would be qualified, how your offering is better, and so forth. And again, I'm looking for you to find jobs or offerings where they have indicated what their price is. So that is this discussion board. It's 25 points. We have until the end of the week to complete that. Now there is another discussion board this week, and it's about museums going digital. And I want to highlight this. Hopefully you have been working on this, but you should be reading the case, Digital Spotlights, Museum Go Digital. It's on page 138. And everyone in the class should answer the 3rd question in the case. With reference to the material in the case study about creating memorable experiences, what more could museums do to engage attendees emotionally? So we want to create experience. An experience might be swimming with the dolphins. An experience might be climbing Mount Everest. An experience might be a tour of some old famous house, or riding around in Hollywood looking at the homes of the stars. But whatever the experience is we want it to be memorable and emotional, right? If you're swimming with the dolphins, you might be sad that they've captured the dolphins and are using them that way. Or you may be emotional about being connected to a marine mammal. Whatever your experience is, it should be memorable and emotional. That's what creates, lasting memories. So if we're creating an event, ultimately we want to do the same thing. But again, in this case study, the first part of this is to address what a museum could do to engage emotionally. And then if you're in tracks 1 or 2, what you could do for your event. And when you're thinking about this and you think about the previous pricing assignment, think about how much this is going to cost and how you're going to budget for this great emotional experiential event that you're creating. If you're in track number 2, then pick any of the other folks who have posted and respond to them with a 1 or 2 paragraph proposal detailing to them why they should hire you or hire you to deliver your service. So if you're a producer, a photographer, a designer, whatever your service is, pitch them essentially on your service and how it will help create and improve guest experiences at their event. You want me to come photograph your event because I'm fun and everybody's going to love taking pictures. And when we have these great pictures, it's going to create great memories. And it's really priced. If you give me $5 a guest, everybody's going to get to go home with 2 photographs plus links to online photographs. And of course, there's some extra money to be made when we sell additional hard copy photographs, mugs, t-shirts, and specialty ties. All right. So then everybody in class, make sure you're engaging and responding to your classmates. That goes true for the pricing one as well. Make sure you're interacting, asking questions, and so forth. All right. So just to review where we are so far, we've talked about today, we're going to talk about pricing, servicescaping, our discussion boards. We've talked about our learning outcomes, and we spent a lot of time on this graph talking about price versus quality and supply during and demand. We have too low a price, we may run out of supply, and people may not be interested because they may not perceive it to be of high quality, and so forth. And so we've just gone through and discussed the discussion boards and giving you a bit of information about what you need to do when you're answering these. So I'm going to just unmute here. Kat, did you have any questions about any of that?
No, I do need to start working on my final.
Yep.
I might do a conference call later.
Please, and this to you and to everybody listening. I'm here to help you get started. So if you're not sure how to start, if you're in the middle of it and you're kind of lost, let me help you. Or if you think you're almost done, but you just want someone to check it out, I can help you with that too. So, I want to help you. All right.
Okay, I did download the template and I set it up to share, but does it work? Did I do it right?
I believe you did. I believe I saw it come through.
Okay.
Did the template make sense to you? Like, can you follow what it's asking for?
Yes.
I think it's a great one from Scotland, but they know their events there. So, all right, I'm going to mute you again unless you have any questions.
Okay.
All right, you're muted, and let's go here back to our presentation. All right, so now we're going to talk about Servicescapes and Servicescaping. And these may be 2 words that are new to you. They shouldn't be based on the prerequisites, but I want to really explain the 2 words and as we get into it. So Servicescapes and Servicescaping is like landscapes and landscaping. Your landscape is the area around your house that you've mowed and trimmed and you've planted flowers and trees. That's your landscape. Your servicescape is all the interior and exterior physical part of your business, but it's all of the artifacts and ambient environment within that space. So it's if it's a restaurant, it's the tables and the chairs, the layout, it's the signs, it's the artwork. If you have a brick wall or a wooden wall or a waterfall inside your restaurant, all that's part of the servicescape. If you're running a booth at the county fair and you're selling Sonoran hot dogs or funnel cakes or hamburgers, the smell of the cooking food, that's part of the servicescape. If you're a high-end restaurant and you have crates of apples in the entryway so everybody can smell these delicious apples as they're walking into your business, that's part of the servicescape. If your staff wears a particular kind of uniform or dress code, the way, if somebody orders milk for their coffee and you ask them, well, do you want milk from a brown cow or a orange cow or a pink cow? There's no such cows, but you have different breeds of cows. If you ask them which kind of cow they wanted the milk from, that would be unusual, but that would be part of the servicescape, part of the service offering. Servicescaping is like landscaping. So whether you did the landscape yourself or you hired somebody to do the landscaping is going around and figuring out what to plant and where to put it. And, especially in other parts of the country where there's more seasons, you want a landscape that looks nice all year long. So in the spring and the fall, it will still look nice. You may have certain things that bloom or change color at different times of the year to make it all kind of work together over time. So just like landscaping is creating the landscape, servicescaping is the act of creating the servicescape for your business. And obviously this applies to hotels and restaurants especially, but we want to consider how this applies to your event. We've talked about in that case study about museums, about experiences. And a big part of that experience is the servicescape. If you're going to a hotel where they have dolphins that you can swim with, how are they treating the dolphins? How big is the pool? Do they add some kind of interesting decor? There's a bar, a tiki bar in San Francisco that's in a hotel, and it's based in a very old hotel that had a big swimming pool in the basement. And they basically built the tiki bar around the pool. You can't swim in the pool, but the way they decorated it looks like a big lagoon, the way you might have a lagoon in a beach in Hawaii or in Tahiti or in Bora Bora. So they incorporated the swimming pool into the servicescape. And so let's just talk about what a servicescape is. So it's the physical design of the facility, but it focuses on the ambient features, the smells, the colors, the choices of material. So again, servicescaping is really beyond the physical. It's this often intangible aspect, the scent, the smell, the lighting, but also the physical layout. So if your waiter or waitress comes to your table and you ask for an extra napkin or an extra straw, do they have it in a pouch and an apron and they can hand it to you immediately? Or do they have to go into a different room, up a flight of stairs, into a back room, get the napkins and come all the way back to your table? If that was the case, that's kind of sounds like a bad design, but also because not only does it sound like a bad design, it sounds like it would take a long time for them to go get that napkin and come all the way back to you. So you'd probably be waiting 5 minutes. Where's that waitress? I asked for more napkins. And for the wait staff, oh, someone wants napkins again. I got to make that whole journey up to the other room, up the stairs, into the supply closet. So we want to make sure that we're designing the space in a way that suits and maximizes the benefits for both the staff and the customer. Now, the whole idea of servicescaping is that all of these materials, signs, artifacts, materials, is it granite or wood? Is it warm lighting, cold lighting? What's the music like? Is there music? Plants, trees, light, artificial light, natural light, all of those things stimulates both the staff and the guests, and that stimulation creates an approach or an avoidance. And sometimes we want, so avoidance, what does that mean? Well, obviously, if you walked into a restaurant and it smelled bad, you would avoid it and you'd walk out and go somewhere else, or it looked dirty. That would create avoidance and you would walk out. But sometimes we want avoidance. We might have a room where it says for employees only or staff only. You don't want staff wandering into the kitchen, for example. Approach, you may have some fancy dish, if you think like a Polynesian restaurant, since we were talking about tiki bars, the famous sort of poo-poo platter that arrives with a flaming kind of volcano mound to the table, and you roast meats and things right at the table. Not only is that really nice for the guests that ordered it, all of the people around it see it and smell it. And so that's not only stimulating the guests that ordered the poo-poo platter, it may be encouraging other guests to order it as well. So that is creating an approach. People might get that, or some restaurant where the entire staff will sing happy birthday. And if we're going to high-end, high-quality fine dining, it may be different things. It may be staff that doesn't really talk to you too much, but it's very efficient and proficient, and it can explain everything on the menu to you, how everything's prepared, and it really help you find the right wine and so forth. So there's all kinds of things that will stimulate the guests and the staff. And so the goal of Servicescaping is to create the space in which customers and staff interact. Obviously, customers with each other, staff with each other, but ultimately how they interact with each other. And again, Servicescapes include signs and other artifacts. Could be the rugs, the chairs, the lighting, what the table is made out. Is it marble or metal or glass that's been cemented into mosaic tiles? And do you have leather banquettes or these sorts of things? So when we're thinking now of an event, we're generally thinking of larger rooms with AV equipment, large movie screens, sometimes booths, sometimes speakers with microphones. So obviously it makes sense that our Servicescape should be really good in terms of good sound quality. If we have speakers, if we have multiple rooms with little sub parts of the conference or the event, obviously we want really good signage. We've already talked about having apps so people can find out information. The apps become tools and signs and artifacts. Our app becomes part of the Servicescape. Not only, again, it's kind of intangible, but when we're at the event and we're running the app truly integrates with it. It's virtual, but it helps us. Oh, it's 5 o'clock. I need to go to the cocktail hour. It's 2 o'clock. Where's the map to find that meeting room that's in the other side of the hotel? They said we should leave a few minutes early to get there. Did you use the app to send a reminder? Or if you're wearing an RFID bracelet and so forth. All of these things work together to help create the environment. And like our museum emotional and experiential case study this week, the Servicescaping impacts that as well. It's part of what makes something memorable. If you've been into a restaurant and you just love the design, you just feel at home and comfortable, that's a good Servicescape. If you're at a hotel and you can easily find where to check in, you can find the elevator, you feel safe at night, you feel safe in the morning. When you go to the dining room, you feel that the wait isn't too long because they've created an order queue system where anyone can just walk in and go right to the buffet. You can pick any table, or if it's very, very busy, they have plenty of staff to direct you to a table and so forth. All of that's part of the Servicescape and Servicescaping, and we need to translate that from a restaurant or a hotel into an event, but also considering that some of our events will happen at a restaurant or near or at a hotel or convention center. So we have to think about how our Servicescape will integrate into the larger Servicescape of the convention center, of the hotel, if we're using the back room of a restaurant. Where are the restrooms? Some restaurants that do a lot of event business will have separate restrooms for the event so that those attendees aren't waiting in line. But where are the restrooms? Again, if it's raining, where's the cloakroom, and so forth. Let's bring up this here and unmute. Hi, Kat, again. Are you following this? Any questions?
No. It's like new information. Like I never paid attention to how they do that, but it does make sense now. Like when you walk in.
Do you have a favorite?
Walk into a place. A favorite place?
Yeah, favorite restaurant or hotel or that kind of bar.
I recently went to the Hard Rock.
Okay.
In San Diego.
Yep.
And I noticed when you walk in, the bar is right off to the right.
Okay.
Yeah, and then to the left is the Nobu.
Yep.
Yeah.
So,
and then like the entrance to like all the rooms, you have to walk through the hallways and pass by like the parties.
That feel nice or good, or that was?
Yeah, that was fun.
feel like you're part of the action,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And that's the Servicescape. Think of, have you ever been on vacation where you've gone to visit some older famous church?
Yeah.
Right. So a
I
church has,
went to Loretta Lynn's house
okay, well, there you
in
go.
Tennessee.
Yep. So I'm sure that was very nice. And you got a sense of her life. And, you know, so there's a Servicescape to a kind of a museum as well.
Yeah, the drive-in. It's
Mhm.
like down in a
So, you know,
canyon. Yeah.
so these are all just, you know, important things to consider, you know, how we're designing our event, what's going to make people comfortable, how do we identify the staff so people know who they are and know, you know, if they have a question, they know where to go. You know, can they find the bathrooms if they need water, or they have a first aid emergency, they know where to go. You know, if they're meeting somebody for a breakout, you know, can they easily find the other participants? So all things to think about. All right. More questions or more thoughts?
No, not right now.
All right. I'll meet you again. We're almost done. All right. And so here we go. So Servicescapes or Servicescaping comes from a person named Professor Mary Jo Bittner. Comes from 1992. And Mary Jo was the first person to describe servicescaping. And she brought in data from multiple disciplines to combine into this theory that allows us to improve the delivery of a service by improving the servicescape. And it may seem at this point very theoretical. I've talked about lighting, natural light, artificial light, smells, senses, material choices, what a sign looks like, uniforms. It's like, you know, it seems like nice stuff, but it can't really impact the price, the delivery. But if we think back to this pricing chart, right? Can we get more demand by changing something in the Servicescape? Can we justify a slightly higher price? Can we actually get more orders? Can we fulfill more orders? Can we make our staff happier? Can we make our guests happier? Well, the answer is yes. Wendy's, the burger chain, starting 3 or 4 years ago, started designing new restaurants. They tested them, obviously. Their older restaurant, kind of old-fashioned look to it, cost about $750,000 per store. The new design costs less. It's only about $500,000, still quite a bit of money. But that newer design with a lower cost actually improves service anywhere from 12 to 20% more business because of the improved servicescaping. It simply looks more modern. Some commentators have said it looks more fast casual than fast food. So they've improved the perception of quality. If you're familiar with the burger chain called Shake Shack, they've kind of made it look more like a Shake Shack. Quite frankly, Burger King is doing the same thing. Metal signs, the new Burger King and McDonald's, and rather the new Wendy's and McDonald's designs incorporate televisions. Some of the Wendy's incorporate fireplaces. So, you know, a very much improved look, but actually translates to more business, more sales, more profit. So it can seem theoretical, but it's not. And so again, for your event, when people come in, can they easily find where to put their umbrella? Can they easily find where to put their baby stroller? Can they keep their baby stroller with them? Can they find the rooms? Can they get help? Can they find out where the bathrooms are? If they need to find local transportation, can they figure out the best way to get to the trolley, to the bus, to order a taxi, and so forth? There's so many little personal things that people need. We haven't talked about it, but obviously Wi-Fi, something that could be very important at most events today. Anyway, it's a very long article. It's fairly academic. It's not a requirement to read it, but if you've never looked at it, it's worth skimming. I do have a link to it. But this slide here, this is the actual heart of Servicescaping. It's figure 2 from Mary Jo Bittner's article. And the first thing that it talks about here on the left are the inputs, the stimulus, the conditions, the space and the function, and signs, symbols, and artifacts. So ambient conditions, temperature, air quality, noise, music, odor. The space function includes layout, equipment, and furnishings. Signs, symbols, and artifacts include signage, personal artifacts, style of decor, etc. A personal artifact may, again, be a uniform. It may be something we have every staff put something in their hair or wear a funny hat. It could be that a chef comes out to the table with their grandmother's cheese grater and grates a little cheese onto your pasta. So all of this, all of these environmental dimensions creates an environment, which Bittner calls a holistic environment, the overall gestalt, or the sum total of all of these dimensions together is the servicescape, and she refers to it as the perceived servicescape. When we say perceived or perception, right, everybody's going to have a different perception. If you walk in and there's marble and you really know marble, you may start thinking, oh, that's Italian marble from a particular marble quarry. If it's in granite and you know granite, you might think, oh, that's granite, looks like granite from Maine, from Deer Isle. If it's wood, you may recognize the kind of wood that it is. If you're someone who's keen to music and you walk in and you know the music that is playing, that might really appeal to you. Knowing the band, or maybe it's a cover, maybe it's a really new band that's covering a very old song, and that appeals to you. So that perception of the servicescaping creates a moderator, and it's going to impact both the employee and the staff. I'm sorry, and the customer, right? Again, if the employee has to go many rooms through stairs, closets to get napkins, that's going to influence them. That's part of the layout. If the guests look around and they can't find where the hostess is at a restaurant, at your event, if they can't find the meeting rooms because there's a lack of sign-ins, that's going to moderate their behavior response, right? And ultimately, it could create approach or avoidance. But the way that it's going to do that is through these cognitive, emotional, and physiological responses. So cognitive, beliefs, categories, right? If you walked in and saw a message from a politician, if you like that politician, that might trigger your belief. If you didn't like that politician, that might trigger a different kind of response. Symbols, signs. If I walk into a restaurant and they have like a funny way of doing the bathrooms, so like, you know, cowgirls and cowboys, or, you know, there's a restaurant in Connecticut that has, you know, the men's room is called Manhattan and the women's room is called Queens, which are boroughs in New York City. When they start getting into these very strange ones, where you're not quite sure, you know, what's Manhattan or Queens, which one, you know, if you start to have to think about it too much, for me, that creates avoidance. Like, I just want to know which one's the men's room. Emotional, right? If you walk in and you like the music and you like the atmosphere, it can put you in a good mood. If you walk in and they're playing literally the song that you hate, and they keep on playing that song all night, that's going to put you in a particular mood. And again, for both staff and guests, so that, you know, the staff, rather the guests may really love the music, but the staff, it may be a soundtrack that gets played every other night. And basically after they've worked there for 30 days, they've heard every song like 500 times, and it just, you know, could become painful to them. So all of that, all of these internal responses based on the perception of the servicescape will create approach or avoidance. So approach will affiliation, exploration, the desire to stay longer. An empty glass on your table, you may, oh, let's leave. They haven't come back to give me a new drink. On the other hand, if they come very quickly to refill your drinks, you may decide to stay longer because you feel that they're being attentive to you. They're giving you respectful and proper service. And then in between all of that, we have the way that the Servicescape, the perception of all of that, creates an interaction between the staff and the customers. So again, can you find the staff? Can you easily talk to them? You can be in a restaurant where it's so loud that you can't understand what the staff is saying, and the staff can't properly talk to you. I'm sure, you could be in a bar where you can't really hear the bartender. Well, maybe that will appeal to some people, but other people, that would probably turn them off. Or the temperature, it's just too cold or too hot. The air conditioner is broken, or the air conditioner is working too good. So anyway, this is Servicescaping, and you're going to need to think about this in terms of your event, the ambient conditions, the space layout especially, and the sign, symbols, and artifacts, and how that will moderate, and create internal responses for people at the event, and hopefully create the right approach. And if there's places where you want people to avoid or stay away from, then you'll have the appropriate signs and symbols to convey that as well. Danger, don't go this way. So that is the last slide. So I'm going to go back to Zoom here, and I guess we lost Kat, so I don't have anybody to ask if they have any questions, but I have made sorry. There we go, back to our slides. I've made these slides already available. When I make this lecture available, will be good. I do want to go over one last thing before we go, which again, from the homepage of the course, make sure each week you're looking at the readings. And I just want to talk about the reading for this week, which is week 4. Again, most weeks we have 2 parts, before Wednesday and then before Sunday. For week 4, it's just doing this, it's a bit more reading than normal, although still it's not that much. The first part is just 5 pages, and it's about managing the Servicescape. Then the next 10 pages is creating a memorable experience. And that's something that really you need to think about. And can you afford that? The food, can you afford to deliver the kind of food you want at the price that you can afford to charge? Again, then chapter 6 is only 4 pages, but it's talking about pricing, and it's getting into an understanding a little bit beyond what we've talked about, but how pricing and marketing work together, and other marketing mix variables that can impact pricing. Buyer perception, which is something we spent quite a bit of time talking about. The price impacts the buyer, right? And same as the Servicescape, right? Between the price and the Servicescaping, that's really what impacts the buyer the most. You can walk into a salon or a bar or a restaurant, a church, a park, an event, a ball game, and depending on how the place is laid out, if it smells clean, looks clean, is appropriately lit, and has the right temperatures and so forth, and we can feel really good about our purchase. On the other hand, if it's dirty, smelly, nasty, unless that's the kind of thing that you want, perhaps a dive bar in Brooklyn, but even that should look and smell appropriate. Finally, chapter 9, we just have another 4 pages, lessons from a marketing guru, introduction to public relations, press releases, and so forth. This is earned media. We've talked about the peso model, and this is part of that. That's the earned in peso. So peso, P-E-S-O, paid, earned, shared, and owned. PR is the earned part of media. Next week, we'll be continuing with Chapter 9. We'll get into that next week. I hope everybody has a great week. This is Professor Shapiro, and I hope if you have questions, you'll let me know. I hope if you have any feedback on the course and so forth, you will let me know as well. And I hope you have a fantastic week. Bye-bye.